This is Film Talk, where we interview the brightest minds in filmmaking 5 days a week. Do you need a great camera for your next shoot? You may want to consider the world's lightest handheld Super 35 digital film camera, Blackmagic's Ursa Mini 4.6K. The Ursa Mini boasts a 4.6K sensor, global shutter, and up to 15 stops of dynamic range. It's perfectly balanced for handheld use and comfortable enough to be used all day long. Scene 1, take 1. Film Talk Nation, we are greenlit for yet another great show. Vanessa Frank here, and I'm excited to bring you our featured guest today, Cath Le Couteur. Cath, are you ready for your close-up?
Sure am, yeah.
Cath Le Couteur is the founder of Shooting People, an online independent film network with over 38,000 members and over 200 films crewed and cast using their services every week. Patrons of Shooting People include Mike Figgis, Michael Winterbottom, Sally Potter, Kevin Smith, and Danny Boyle. Cath was the recipient of the Sundance Alfred P. Sloan Commissioning Grant in 2010. Her short films have won numerous awards, including the Best British Short at the Edinburgh International Film Festival, Best Short Film at the Barcelona Film Festival, and nominations such as Best Short Film at the Berlin International Film Festival. Cath, it's an honor to have you on the show today.
Oh, it's really nice to be part of this podcast. Thanks for having me.
So, Cath, I was probably one of your first members back in 1998 when Shooting People was merely a daily email network for independent filmmakers, right at the genesis of this whole adventure that you've been on. So, for me, this is particularly exciting because the very first jobs that I ever got in the film industry were through Shooting People. I ostensibly would not have had as quick and easy of an entry into the industry if it hadn't have been for this group of people who decided that they were going to start sending out emails every single day with potential job offers and work opportunity offers and internships. So I have a huge debt of gratitude, not just to you, but to the Shooting People team.
That's incredible that you were basically a founding member. 1998.
I was.
That's incredible.
And it was
that really is incredible because that was the very first year that we started, and Jess and I were still operating out of our bedroom at that stage.
Oh my gosh.
We ran it for free for 4 years just out of our bedrooms, trying to hold down full-time jobs at the same time.
That is amazing.
That's amazing that you were part of that founding group, basically.
Well, and when I started getting it, I had just we only just had the internet, so this was like we were just figuring out what email was, at least in my home.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of people still didn't have email at that stage.
Yeah, and it was like
so
this very basic. It was this very basic HTML email that we'd get every day. That was just the most exciting thing ever, because for someone like myself, it was like this one glimmer of hope of how I could get involved in the film industry, even though I didn't live in a major capital or major film hub.
Well, it's so great that you say that, because, I mean, when Jess and I set it up, our intention was really just to set up something that could help us make films. You know, I mean, we first kind of met. I came over from Australia in 1995, and I happened to get my first kind of job with the first internet cafe in the world, in fact, called Siberia in London. And I met Jess Search, who's my other business partner in Shooting People, and she was working in TV, and we met really early on and decided that we wanted to make a film together, which we did, which was called, what was it called? It was called 174, that's right, which was the mathematical equation that we'd worked out was the perfect number of people for you in London. So if you were single, there were 174 people in London that could be your date.
Really?
And we worked that out very seriously with deep mathematical fidelity, shall we say. And that had Sally Phillips in it, and that was a film that we made that was huge amounts of fun, had thousands of errors in it. And in the process of making that film, we kind of realized that the way that you could discover how to get better at making a film, the way that you could discover, gosh, how do I shoot on the tube without a license, we needed sound recorders, how are we going to find that person, was from other filmmakers, not from state bodies. And so really, really early on, Shooters was a way for other filmmakers to come together and share information, share ideas, find other collaborators. And I think what I really love about it is that principle has stayed true. I mean, we've obviously changed, and we now aren't running it out of our bedrooms, and we actually have servers now in place rather than piggybacking off the back of people's friend servers. I mean, it was all held together by sticky tape and glue in those days. But yeah, the principle of it is still completely the same, where it's, you know, it's one of the best ways that you can help get your film off the ground and get your film seen is by talking to other filmmakers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine how gratifying it must be to know that there's every week a couple of hundred film crews that are being put together because of your baby, because of this thing that you've developed.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. It's really, really great. It is really lovely to get a sense of, you know, different voices and different stories being able to be heard, because, you know, it's tough old business film. It's still difficult to get a film off the ground, and very difficult if you want to be doing distinctive, you know, innovative storytelling. And really the only way to do that is to find other like-minded collaborators who will join you on the journey of hell that is making a film.
Absolutely. I think that it's a component that for many of us is a part of why we love this industry. Is it's an industry like no other, for having experiences of getting to meet all kinds of people you wouldn't normally get to meet, and kind of being thrown into this adventure together and having to figure out how you're going to come out the other side.
Exactly. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? I don't think there's ever been a film that I've worked on, and I don't think anybody else has ever not worked on a film where you come off saying that was my family for that intense period of time.
Absolutely. And then there's like the post-shoot depression/relief, where you're kind of, you know, at least I find I'm in my pajamas for about 2 days afterwards, kind of jointly just completely relieved to be able to rest, and at the same time completely devastated that I'm not going to get to see these people on a daily basis anymore.
Yeah, that's so true. Yes, that's so true. I mean, it's funny too. I think for people perhaps looking in from the outside, it often looks like filmmaking, the actual being on set side of things, is hugely fun, and for sure it absolutely can be, but it really is crisis management.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
well, so
the intensity of that experience is, yeah, exactly. Decompressing in your pajamas, that's what one needs to do.
So, Cath, you've explained a little bit of the origin of shooting people. How did you personally initially get involved in the film industry? Was that something that happened much before the shooting people inception?
I think, no, I think it really, my first kind of, I mean, my introduction to the film industry really came about meeting Jess, us becoming kind of best friends, deciding to make a film, loving that, realizing that actually we had so much to learn from other filmmakers. Wouldn't it be great if we could have a collective of filmmakers that could advise each other and share information? And after, so I guess in tandem, we then ran it from our bedrooms for a couple of years, and then decided to, as it grew and became, you know, in the kind of thousands of people, we realized we had to do something to make it not fall over. So we borrowed some money from the bank, and also borrowed from both of our 90-year-old grannies.
Oh, wow.
They each gave us, the grannies saw the future.
Of the internet, that's pretty amazing.
They each gave us $5,000, which was amazing, which meant that we could then invest in proper database and you know.
Gosh, if anyone, I would imagine that it would be Grandma who could see the future of social networking for filmmakers.
Yeah, the grannies were on it. The grannies could see the future. Bless them both. Neither of them here with us now, but yeah, they completely started us. So I think I was in the middle. I just made that film with Jess 174. I was really excited by setting up Shooting People, and then having had several years working in the very early stages of new technologies, this early 90s, when, as you said, most people didn't have email, I felt a growing sense of wanting to kind of tell stories in a more impacting way, and I kind of found myself going more analog, if you like, and applied to the National Film and TV School as a director. So I then got education, really, as a director at the NFTS here in the UK, and then went on to make other shorts. So, yeah, it was a kind of a combination. It definitely started with Jess and I just deciding, it'd be great to tell this story, and it'd be great to make a film, and then, yes, that slowly, then I ended up at film school and then went on and made other shorts, and that kind of became my entry, I guess, into the industry.
So through the Shooting People community, which is now, I'm trying to figure out, is it 17 years old? It's so
scary when you say that.
Yeah, I was thinking because I was about 16 when I started getting it, and I'm guessing that's about 17 years.
I'm that is so fantastic. I think I'm going to have to send you a founder member plaque or something.
Oh, yeah, I guess there's probably not that many of us. To me, it seems like so obvious. It's just been a part of pretty much my entire adult life. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, 98 was when we first started.
Yeah. Well, so with having had this major community of filmmakers now over almost 2 decades, I would imagine that you've maybe seen some real evolution in, be it the kind of films people are making or the kind of way that they're operating. Have you seen some emerging trends, some changes, or is everything much the same as it was back in 1998 in that respect?
No, it's transformed in so many different ways. I mean, I think fundamentally, and certainly independent film is always about kind of collaboration, sharing ideas, exchanging advice, that kind of thing. So the practice of filmmakers helping each other out has continued consistently. But without a doubt, the landscape has changed beyond anything. I mean, back in 98, really, films were still being made on film.
Yeah.
The digital world has absolutely made filmmaking far more accessible. There's no excuse to not be able to make a film these days.
So are you seeing like a greater volume of projects kind of per capita, so to speak, within your community now than maybe we would have seen 15 or 16 years ago?
Yes. Yes. There's certainly more film projects being made, certainly more teams of people coming together to want to tell stories in different ways. And I think the really significant challenge for filmmakers now is actually, how do you get your film seen?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
funding and distribution.
Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. No, which ironically, it's funny kind of talking to you about it and kind of thinking this through. I mean, funding and distribution has always been, serious issues for filmmakers, and it was still a big deal in the 90s, of course, but it's just the kinds of challenges and the kind of shape and form now of what distribution looks like and funding looks like is considerably different.
Yeah. And so have you guys as a Shooting People team, been working on avenues to help somewhat fix this problem of, okay, now filmmaking is accessible to pretty much anyone who even has a smartphone, but now we have an issue of a lot of content and not necessarily always the vehicles to be able to get that out to an audience. Have you guys, are you kind of working, have you been seeing some solutions come to the forefront, or is that still something that is not clear to you guys as a community?
I think it's definitely not clear. I think there's a huge amount of conversation happening around it. We've made a number of different partnerships with different organizations that are starting to forge completely new paths for both funding and distribution. So we have a partnership in place, for example, with Kickstarter to help filmmakers raise funding themselves through Kickstarter. We have partnerships in place with organisations like BritDoc that work with third-party, often NGOs in the world of documentary, to get films seen by greater audiences. So we're putting partnerships in place with some of the more innovative organisations that are looking to find alternate mechanisms for filmmakers to really ensure that one can build a sustainable career. Because I think what we've certainly seen this decade, and it's true, I mean, it's true in Hollywood. If you look at the kinds of films that are being made now, people will say the middle funded film doesn't exist anymore. It's either blockbuster sequels, 20 million plus, or it's less than $1 million. There's absolutely nothing in between.
It's a huge issue.
So given that we're an independent community, the kind of less than £1 million projects, those kind of feature films need alternative and need innovative ways to think about how can they reach audiences. And some organisations like BritDoc, like Vimeo, like Kickstarter are starting to introduce, just different ideas about how you can connect with audiences. But there's also a responsibility for filmmakers now. I mean, you can't ignore your audience anymore. I think this is also a really interesting area of debate because people understand now that it's very difficult to raise finance for your film if you aren't thinking about how you're going to grow your audience. Very difficult then to get the film seen if you're not clear on how you're going to target specific audiences. And yet at the same time, filmmakers will kind of say, well, I don't want to, I want to make a film. Do I have to devote 2 years then to doing all the work that's required to do that? And I think that's a really interesting question because no one doesn't want to then spend 2 years just having to work at how you can get your film sold into different territories or sold through to different audiences. And there's some very interesting thinking. There's a guy called John Reese who wrote a book called Think Outside the Box, Office. Sorry, I forgot the last word. Think Outside the Box Office. And, his ideas are, as a filmmaker, you need to be thinking about putting in a budget line for your film for social media. You need to be thinking about a budget line for what is your online distribution and marketing. And these are ideas that might sound fairly straightforward to others, but actually it's not being traditionally part of a film budget.
Absolutely.
One hasn't actually put above-the-line costs in for the audience side of things.
Absolutely. I'm somewhat surprised with just the plethora of content that comes out of the Shooting People community on a weekly basis. I'm just somewhat surprised that there hasn't been already a OTT platform or streaming platform put in place as an extension of that.
You mean from our team?
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, I think it's a really, really interesting question, and I think the video on demand market is a market that makes a lot of claims at the moment. But actually isn't showing the results. And, every other week there is a new video on demand distribution website that sets itself up that says, come here, pay us, and we'll distribute your film. And I think we made a decision very, very early on that actually looking around at other partners that were being effective in video on demand and doing partnerships with those organizations was better than starting up yet another new startup that was kind of making claims that couldn't necessarily be fulfilled. I mean, I think there's we do a lot of lobbying on this side of things. It drives me absolutely crazy that people like iTunes, they can distribute the film for you, but they will not give you access to audiences that are buying your content.
I mean, there's just a complete lack of.
Why?
I think there's a real endemic issue right now that's plaguing our industry of a lack of clarity about online figures, and I think unfortunately, oftentimes the people that affects the most is the filmmakers, because you really do not have any means of either substantiating a sales agent's track record or a third party's track record. And furthermore, I've often thought, wow, it puts you in a difficult position, because then when you go to finance your next project, traditionally what you could do back in the day was just show your theatrical receipts, your home entertainment receipts, and based off of that,
Right.
you have a precedent. But how do you do that when you're streaming via VOD options that are giving you absolutely zero figures? It becomes impossible for
That's
financiers.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, brilliantly, most recently, Sundance Artist Services have started to look at this, and they are putting together really detailed analysis that is looking at film producers who have gone into video on demand to extrapolate actual figures. Who's done well, why, and where, in order to be able to kind of help present a kind of guide for filmmakers to help understand what some of the viable routes might be. But they're also strangled by the lack of figures coming out from, you know, the gateway players that just will not share their information.
I mean, that's a problem, is that there's not really, as far as I can tell, any way of unblocking that situation. It's, yeah, interesting times. Well, Cath, to get a little bit more personal, I would love to know, what is one thing that you wish you'd known earlier in your career?
Oh, God. Millions of things. What do I wish I'd known when I'd first started out? I think for me, one of the big things I've discovered, particularly as I've kind of entered into the world of features, is that writing is really difficult.
Yeah.
Writing as a writer-director is really difficult. I have so much admiration for writers, and I think it's one of those things when you're kind of working in feature films, particularly in the early days, you kind of need to write the films that you want to work in, because you're not going to be in a situation where people are just sending you scripts. And I think if I had known how torturous that process would be, then I may have collaborated with other writers a little bit earlier. I would say writers are your best friend, without a doubt.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've had many ups and downs in your career. What is the biggest challenge that you've encountered so far in terms of your career, and how did you turn that situation around?
In my career? Gosh, again, I kind of think about being on set when you ask that question. I think of all the various kind of like crises that take place when one is on set, because I think in a funny kind of way, that's where it's the most active in terms of trying to turn things around. Because otherwise, I think, you know, one's film career is just a drip feed of rejections, and then occasionally the fantastic golden ticket where you get funding to then develop your film, or you get greenlit and you're able to go and make your film. So, I mean, what comes to mind is something really silly and really, really tiny. But I think it makes me feel that this is often what the filmmaking process is like. I made a short film called Spin, and it was a kind of teenage film about teenagers in a game of spin the bottle. And I had two guys in it. One of them was a brilliant actor, a guy called Julian Morris, who's now in fact, doing incredibly well. He's in, what's that TV series with God in the title? Hand of God.
Oh,
Julian's in Hand of God and doing really, really brilliantly. And I had another gorgeous guy who was not an actor, but who absolutely lit up in when we were casting. And he wanted to go on and be a policeman. And we were on set, and, you know, again, this was a kind of short, it was all pulled together, you know, on not very much money, so we didn't have time for rehearsals or anything like that. And I was on set with him, and we had started on, you know, it was kind of like the first opening scene, and bless him, in the kind of like 5-10 seconds that we started rolling the scene, I kind of realized that what I was seeing through the camera was terrible, He was completely over the top in the way that he was acting. And I hadn't seen that before. When he was kind of when Ryan was being Ryan, he was amazing. He had a really fantastic kind of inner soul, if you like, and a kind of spark on camera. But suddenly we were rolling cameras and he was completely over the top. And it was kind of like, oh gosh, what are we going to do here? We've only got 2 days of filming. And I remembered this bit of advice that somebody had told me who did a lot of work with actors, which was it is all about concentration. And I went over to Ryan, and in this particular scene, I said to him, listen, all I want you to do in this scene is just count in your head up to 10 and then back from 10, or 1 to 20 and then 20 back to 1. And he went, okay. And we went back around, we started the scene again, and he was amazing. And in his head, he was just counting 1, 2, 3,
That's
4,
incredible.
5. But back came this concentration and the spark and this incredible, he was incredible. And all he was doing was counting in his head in that scene. So I know that's a really kind of small, it's funny how these things become very big on set. It's like, I've only got 2 days, I can't get the performance that I need, this isn't working. And being able to kind of draw on advice from others is just a wonderful thing.
It's an incredible story of finding a solution under pressure. I've been in that situation myself where you get someone in front of the camera who just freezes or can't remember their lines, and there's a lot of time pressure. And I think it's a very difficult thing as a director to not contribute to the situation by allowing your external demeanor to depict frustration, which I think the moment that an actor feels like you're disappointed in them, it's gonna...
Exactly. You have to disappear and cry in private.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I've done that
Find
many
a
of the
solution
time.
and come back.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you were saying earlier how torturous of a process writing can be. And I would imagine that in the shooting people community, there were just countless stories of people who have hung in their career for years and years and years, oftentimes with one rejection letter after another and not really getting that break that they were maybe hoping for. Having observed this from afar and having had your own career where you've evidently been in the industry for a while now, what do you think the keys are for sustaining oneself in the midst of rejection and bills that need to be paid and all of these things that independent filmmakers have to deal with?
I hope this doesn't sound trite, but community.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think that filmmaking can be, it can be particularly isolating. Writing can be incredibly isolating. And I think some of the best experiences of my life, I was accepted to the MacDowell Artist Residency and also Rockefeller Bellagio Artist Residency. And, that's kind of 4 weeks in the woods on your own to kind of write a feature script. And every evening you come back and you're able to kind of share and talk with other artists that are there, visual artists, writers, animators, dancers, whatever. And you kind of realize that being able to share, without sounding dramatic, I really don't want to sound dramatic, but being able to share the pain of creative process is fantastic.
Yes.
Because it reminds you at the same time that actually the reason you're doing what you're doing is because you really believe in what you're doing and you want to tell a particular story. You want to make a piece of work because it's meaningful for you. And you're going to kill yourself along the way and torture yourself along the way. And being able to just share that process with other creatives, I think, is the most kind of like nurturing, wonderful thing. And it's been a major part for me in terms of what has helped me continue on projects that have become really, really difficult.
That's a wonderful piece of advice, and particularly apt coming from someone who is, in so many senses, the mother of an entire community of filmmakers. In terms of that community that is so indispensable for anyone who wants to sustain a career over a substantial period of time, I know that Shooting People is in the UK. That's where it was birthed, so to speak, and it's also in New York now. Are we going to be seeing Shooting People LA anytime soon?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We've thought a bit about LA, in particular quite recently, because there's been a lot of filmmakers that we've met along the way that are starting to work more on independent productions. I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like the culture of New York filmmaking maps much more strongly to the culture of shooters in the UK.
Yeah.
I think it would, there's a really fantastic, there's difference in that culture where, I really admire. The New Yorkers are much, much more entrepreneurial. In the UK there's a tendency to kind of rely on state subsidy and, you can't spend your life whinging about the fact that you haven't had, funding from a public body to make your film. You've got to be, these are the days, you've got to be entrepreneurial and get out there and find a way to make it work. So given that cultural exchange has been so rich, my sense is that it might be interesting for us to go to India or South America ahead of doing LA, which I think would be different, obviously, to New York, but still kind of similar.
Yeah. Is it a big logistical exercise every time you guys launch in a new city?
Yes.
You see, I'm so naive. Yes. It's just for me. It's always just been an email that magically appears.
Because the assumption is, oh, great, you're doing so well. Why don't you just kind of launch in another city? And the reality is that for communities to work they only work if they're authentic. And my belief is that one has to start on the ground, and one has to start being very kind of active on the ground and listening to filmmakers and finding out what their particular needs are. And actually that ends up being quite costly.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to be in different cities around the world, but at the moment there's also so many key services that we would still love to deliver here in the UK. Being able to set up a kind of location space, for example, where people can talk about, cheap casting rehearsal spaces or fantastic locations that might be available, or brilliant cafes for writers to work in, or, where you could share that information and be able to pin particular locations. So I think also my personal interest is in developing the kinds of things that can help filmmakers. Whilst I think it probably would make sense to keep expanding into different cities, I'm a bit of a sucker for, the new things.
Yeah. Well, do you feel, am I right in thinking and kind of deriving from this conversation that that's somewhat the USP of Shooting People as opposed to many other online connection platforms for filmmakers, is that it does have a very strong offline component? It's not just about, hey, let's exchange some thoughts and some tips digitally, but it's very much just a platform for people to meet in person and to work personally together in the flesh.
Yes, both those things happen. We do a fair, we do a number of different events with key festivals throughout the year, but I would say that really our core USP is still building the services that allow others to come together.
Yeah.
So Shooters is a place where, other people can post up events and parties and panels and, there's a huge amount of activity that comes through Shooters on a daily basis where people are meeting in the flesh.
Yeah.
I mean, even right now there's, the London Short Film Festival is on, and there's 100 shooters with films in that festival.
Wow.
So, they're all over at Hackney Attic, meeting up. And in fact, there's a panel tonight that we were hosting on Sunday.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're still just enablers, I think, allowing people to... I guess we don't want to be a place where we also tell people how to make a film. That's never been the intention. I think there are so many different ways to make a film that we don't set out to say, hey, come to us and we will tell you exactly how you can do this. It's come and meet the, collaborators that appeal to you, that you want to work with, and develop your own processes for getting, fantastic, bold films and stories up and out.
I think that's very empowering for your audience. Well, Cath, we're about to enter our final act in which we're going to be getting some of your top recommendations. But before we do so, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. When you're putting together that masterpiece movie, the coloring is a major creative decision. It can make the difference between whether the audience interprets your story as warm, cold, dark, or light, and it can help define the genre of the film. Here's a quick tip. Horror movies tend to have blue tones. Romantic comedies tend to have warm tones. Apocalyptic movies tend to be gray and washed out. Movies in which reality is off kilter tend to have green tones. And action movies tend to feature a lot of teal and orange, particularly in their artwork. The Emmy Award-winning Davinci Resolve from Blackmagic will help you get that perfect color for your next production. The Davinci Resolve 12 combines professional non-linear video editing with the world's most advanced color corrector, so you can now edit, color correct, finish, and deliver all from one system. The Davinci Resolve is completely scalable and resolution independent, so it can be used on set, in a small studio, or integrated into the largest Hollywood production pipeline. From creative editing and multi-camera television production to high-end finishing and color correction, only Davinci Resolve features the creative tools, compatibility, speed, and legendary image quality that you need to manage your entire workflow, which is why it is the #1 solution used on Hollywood feature films. Cath, welcome to the final act where you'll be showing incredible resources and mind-blowing answers. Are you ready?
Sure.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
I got some great advice from someone really recently, which was have more than one project on the go.
Yeah.
I love that, and I wish I could apply it to my life. I tend not to. I tend to be very myopic. I'm working on a feature film at the moment. I've become completely obsessed by it, and I think it would do me much better if I had more than one project on the go.
Yeah, do you find that there's like a loyalty issue with that? Because I personally, I struggle with the same issue of feeling like, even though I know, and I've learned over the last year, the importance of having multiple projects, I kind of almost feel like I should be so committed to this one project. Yeah.
You're being unfaithful.
Yeah, and it's really, I find it really uncomfortable.
Well, that's hilarious. I mean, it is really, really tricky. But I think, recently what's happened to me is I got some money in a small award to work on a project about space junk, documentary and a interactive and a sound installation thing, and that happened quite recently. And what it's done is it's forced me to put down the other feature I'm developing. I'm forced to, because I've now got this project.
Yeah.
So in a funny kind of way, in the first time in my life, I feel like, ooh, maybe I have multiple projects. And actually, I do find that putting my head into the dock right now is making me think differently and more hopefully about the other feature.
Yeah. Well,
so,
I mean,
I totally get that sense of betrayal.
In a sense, you kind of always have multiple projects going on anyway, because you have this pretty significant job of playing host to over 38,000 filmmakers, which is no small feat in its own right.
Well, in truth, I have a great team, and I am part-time on that, and I have a brilliant team, and I should thank the team, actually, because they're the ones that really are looking after it now.
Yeah. Well, Cath, if you had just one movie to stake your entire career on, what kind of movie would it be, and what talent would you want attached?
Oh, my goodness. One movie to stake my entire career on. Like I could just come up with anything.
Anything you want.
Okay, so we'll bin the ones that I'm working on at the moment. Gee, what would I like to do? I would... I've always loved the idea of doing a movie about female con men. Like a duo.
That's good.
An underground female con men. They're going to go and rob banks or something in a really inventive way.
Oh my gosh, that is such a cool idea.
Do you think?
Yeah, I do. It kind of makes me think.
Maybe they exist. Maybe I have to find the kind of duo women
Yeah.
con men. In fact, I did read once that there was this kind of British, hysterical kind of eccentric British duo, older women
Huh.
who went on a spree of conning. But I like the idea of robbing banks. I feel like robbing
Yeah.
banks would be is a good metaphor for now.
Yeah. Very cool. Very, very cool. And if you could recommend one book for our listeners, something that maybe is film oriented, what would it be and why?
A book, did you say?
Yeah, book.
Book. Oh, well, I'm an avid reader. It has to be a film book, yes?
If there's something else that you found particularly helpful to your career that's not a film book, I definitely want to hear about it.
All right. Well, no. I read a lot, and I think books are the most amazing things in the entire world, and can feed a film career like no other. I mean, in terms of basic film books, I think outside the box office. If you're a creative, read it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. In terms of other books, well, I've just finished M Train by Patti Smith, which is absolutely stunning and incredibly evocative of her sense of loss, really, about her partner and her life and her work. And it just breathes the most kind of fantastic visual images throughout. She's such a gorgeous writer. And there's, the kind of thinking behind it, the sadness and also exhilaration of loss. Is incredibly powerful, and just again, because it's Patti Smith, just some wonderful, wonderful moments where she finds things that she photographs, some fantastic visual imagery.
Sounds beautiful. Well, Film Talk
It is. It's
Nation,
wonderful. Yeah.
Film Talk Nation, I know that you love audio. To thank you for joining us today, we've partnered with our friends over at Audible to offer you a free audiobook. Great titles available include Story by Robert McKee, Save the Cat Strikes Back by Blake Snyder, Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling, and Your Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. If you haven't already done so, you can claim your free audiobook at audibletrial.com/film talk. That's audibletrial.com/film talk. And this link will also be included in today's show notes. Cath, if you could recommend one movie for our listeners to check out, what would it be and why?
I think just because of the sadness of the week, David Bowie, I'd recommend either let's say Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. I think it's a fantastic film with the most extraordinary soundtrack by Ryuichi Sakamoto, and Bowie is amazing in it. He's also amazing in a very strange film called The Man Who Fell to Earth, which was a Nick Rogue film. Sorry, I know you've asked for one.
No, it's great. I want to hear it.
I can never sign off on one.
I know it's hard, isn't it?
The Man Who Fell to Earth is a very, very strange sci-fi film directed by Nick Rogue. It's got the most extraordinary sex scene between Bowie and I forget the actress that he's in that film with, towards the end of the film, between Bowie, her, and a gun.
Oh, gosh.
And if you're looking for fantastic cinematic sequences, and particularly one of the best sex scenes ever, check out The Man Who Fell to Earth. And
that
yes,
so
sad, the Bowie
oh my gosh.
death.
And then, well, thank you for those very
Merry
thematic...
Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, who's also marvellous in it.
Thank you for those very thematic suggestions. I know that many people in our audience, if they haven't already seen those movies, will want to check them out as part of their Bowie nostalgia.
Yeah.
So obviously, Shooting People is an amazing online resource, and I am going to include the link for that in the show notes because I really do feel that anyone who is in the Shooting People kind of catchment area, be it the UK or New York, really does need to check it out. It's it's what is it like? It's a few pounds a year. I mean, it's very. From what I recall, it's we
always want to keep subscriptions low. So it's £10 a month or
£10 a month. Yeah,
I
mean, it's a very, very small investment to make into potentially being able to connect with some of the best filmmakers that one could ever hope to meet. But other than the obvious choice of Shooting People, is there maybe a website or an app that you have found particularly helpful in your filmmaking that you'd want to recommend?
I think for directors, there's some fantastic apps around. I particularly like, in the apps that I use on set, are some of the vision camera apps. Artemis, I think. I don't know if it's Artemis or Artemis.
Artemis, yes.
Artemis, thank you. Artemis is absolutely fantastic. And I would also say the app that I use religiously, because I love it, is the GoPro interfacing with the GoPro camera by your phone, which means that the GoPro app, if you have a GoPro, the app for it is sensational.
Yeah.
Because you can stick the GoPro on the bonnet of a car, and then you can sit inside the car and you can instruct it to record. And
does
it
make your phone a monitor?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's got wireless. Cool. So it's connected wirelessly to the GoPro, so you could put the GoPro anywhere you want. So, for example, outside on the bonnet of the car, be driving down the road, you can sit inside the car, record, click stop. It's fantastic, and you get to see it all.
Back in the day, someone would have had to sit on the boot of the car.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer now.
Yeah, now I'm feeling sad. That sounds fun, sitting on the boot of the car.
Doesn't it just? And for our audience that aren't familiar with it, could you just briefly explain what Artemis does?
Artemis is basically a viewfinder that it's just a director's viewfinder that allows you to look at different lenses.
Yeah.
And see, so it has a whole range of different cameras and the lenses. You can imagine, you can look through your iPhone and you can understand what an Ultra HD lens would look like. And you can set, it's also fantastic for storyboarding, so you can set if you want 50mm lens or an 85 lens. It interacts so that you can start to build storyboards for work that you might be wanting to put together a storyboard for. It's fantastic if you're on location.
Isn't it so amazing that just a few years ago, pre-visioning was really something for the elite, and now pretty much anyone who has a tablet or a phone can do a pretty outstanding job of pre-visioning on nothing more than the cost of, maybe a $50 app.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So
and that you can do a shot sequence in, storyboard in your phone while you're on location. It's incredible.
It's amazing. Well, I know that many people who will have been listening to this interview who maybe have not yet had a chance to check out Shooting People are going to be very interested to find out how they can connect with Shooting People. And so I was hoping you could briefly explain that to us, and specifically as well for people who may be outside of the catchment area. For example, they're in LA. If they like the sound of this, they go, wow, a community of 38,000 independent filmmakers. That's really cool. I'd maybe love to give this community some opportunities. What are some of the ways that people can connect up with this mission that you guys are on?
Sure. Well, I think for anybody who might be interested in either shooting in the UK or New York, or getting funding from the UK or New York, they should definitely join us and be part of the community. And they can just go to the site to join that. For people outside the UK and New York, there's lots of different things that you can interact with on the site. All the discussions, for example, that are taking place between filmmakers and also industry folk. For example, there's a Q&A at the moment up there from Luke Moody, who is the film distribution head for BritDoc, and his thoughts on how the landscape for documentary filmmaking is changing and what kind of funds they have. And they're a global fund, so they fund documentary films from around the world. And so anybody can go to the site and read those kind of Q&As without necessarily having to join. There's also, we run a monthly Film of the Month competition, so if people wanted to actually see some of the work that people are doing, we get that judged by industry patrons, so it's Louis Theroux for this month.
Wow.
People can also watch, the films that have been voted by the community as being the best, and see the comments that Louis Theroux leaves on those films. So there's definitely different parts of the community that people can read, watch, connect with without necessarily having to be a member. But I think if you're an actor or your crew or a director, producer, and you're thinking about wanting to join an independent production, or you want to find other collaborators, and UK and New York feels right for you, then please do join us.
Absolutely. I fully endorse that. Well, Cath, it's time for the martini shot. What parting piece of guidance do you want to share with us?
Parting guidance.
Yes.
Oh, have fun. That's it.
Great.
Have fun. Have fun. Have fun, have fun, have fun.
That's like the most succinct piece of parting guidance I've ever been given, and honestly, probably one of the most profound as well. So, well, that's a wrap.
Oh, it's been so nice talking to you. Congratulations on setting up this podcast. What a brilliant idea.
Well, Film Talk Nation, in this industry, you're only as good as the people you know. And today you've been hanging out with Cath Le Couteur and myself. If you want to go the extra mile, head over to filmtalkpodcast.com and type Cath Le Couteur into the search bar. The show notes from today's show will appear along with everything we discussed, like Cath's recommended book and movie. Cath, we appreciate you sharing your priceless insight with us today. Film Talk Nation thanks you, and we'll see you on the red carpet.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.